The sky above Centauri 9 was a dying shade of orange, smeared with the ash of fallen ships and the stench of defeat. The Galactic Coalition's last outpost burned slowly, like the hope that had flickered in its soldiers' eyes just days ago. Commander Threx of the Jirvok Dominion watched from the ridge, 4 beady eyes scanning the smoldering ruins. The war was all but over. The Coalition had fought bravely, but it wasn't enough. Their fleets were decimated, their leaders captured, their morale shattered. "All that's left is the Earth detachment," growled Threx, his spiked mandibles twitching with satisfaction. "Humans, the last rats in the sewer." General Kator, the Dominion's strategist, stepped forward with a skeptical glance. "They're unpredictable, Threx. You've seen what they did at Gerrel Prime. Half our battalion gone in an hour?" Threx snorted, a wet, guttural sound. "Desperation makes them clever, but now they have nothing. No reinforcements, no fleet, just dirt and bones." Far below them, in the shadows of the ruined outpost, the humans had gone silent. No signals, no movement, not even a trace on scanners. Some believed they'd already fled. Others feared worse, that they were planning something. Inside the underground bunker, Captain Mason Cade leaned against the steel wall, wiping grime from his face with a shaking hand. He looked like hell. Skin smudged with soot, eyes bloodshot, armor cracked. Around him, the last dozen members of the 9th Human Recon Regiment sat in silence. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were the ones Earth sent when diplomacy failed, when war became extinction, the unspoken elite. "We're down to 13, Mason muttered, voice low. "No medics, no drones, no uplink, and the Dominion thinks we're dead." "Then let's keep it that way," said Corporal Vega, locking another cartridge into her plasma rifle. She'd taken a hit last week, fractured ribs, concussion, but she hadn't stopped moving. None of them had. That's what made them dangerous. Mason nodded, eyes narrowing. "Good, because if they're convinced we're ghosts, then let's haunt the bastards." They didn't cheer. They never did. This wasn't about morale. It was survival, revenge, duty. One by one they moved through the dark, checking gear, securing their weapons, silently preparing for the kind of war Dominion soldiers weren't bred to understand. The human kind. Dirty, vicious, relentless. Above them, Threx ordered his forces to advance into the bunker zone. 1,000 Dominion soldiers, armored in exosuits and wielding molecular disruptors, surged forward, confident, loud, ready to wipe out the last remnants of Earth's defiance. They didn't know they were walking into a maze of booby traps, pressure mines, and rerouted thermal vents that cooked intruders alive. They didn't know the 9th had memorized every inch of the terrain, had wired the ruins to collapse with the pull of a cord, had stockpiled enough stolen explosives to blow a crater the size of a stadium. They didn't know the humans weren't hiding. They were waiting. The first explosion wasn't loud. It was deep, like the growl of an ancient beast beneath the earth, shaking the bones of every Dominion soldier within a half-mile radius. Then came the second, louder, sharper. It split a battalion right down the middle, sending metal and flesh skyward in a rain of molten gore. Screams followed. Not human. Dominion, high-pitched, confused, terrified. Captain Mason Cade didn't flinch. He stood motionless, eyes locked on the feed coming from the bunker's flickering recon cams. Every trap was working exactly as planned, a symphony of destruction conducted by Earth's most savage tacticians. "Zone 3's collapsing," Vega whispered, smiling grimly as she peered over Cade's shoulder. "That's at least 50 of them gone. Probably more." Mason didn't answer. His hand hovered over the detonator for Zone 4. The Dominion troops had clustered in the center of a burned-out depot, right where they were supposed to. They'd underestimated Earth again. That was their mistake. It always was. He pressed the switch. The Earth split open with a roar that sent a shockwave through the ruined valley. Plasma tanks hidden beneath the rubble ignited in unison, vaporizing 3 full squads and turning the ground into a bubbling pit of fire and molten steel. Dominion soldiers scattered like insects. Some fired into the darkness, others ran, none escaped. The humans emerged from the smoke like shadows. No battle cry, no flag waving, just silence and precision. Corporal Vega dropped 2 with shots to the skull. Private Hanlon launched a drone swarm that burst mid-air, raining shrapnel coated in a neurotoxin the Dominion hadn't even known existed. Sergeant Reyes, the quiet one, slit throats with a blade soaked in battery acid. These weren't just soldiers. They were predators. Trained in wars Earth didn't talk about. Taught to kill in silence and survive in hell. Mason moved like a ghost between pillars of fire, his armor already stained with alien blood. A Dominion captain lunged at him, spear raised. Mason ducked, rolled, and drove a knife into the creature's throat, twisting until he felt cartilage break. He whispered, "Too slow," and shoved the body aside like garbage. General Kator watched in horror from the ridge. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. Commander Threx's mandibles trembled. They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to erase us. He was right. Because when humans lost their fleets, they didn't surrender. When they lost their allies, they didn't panic. When the world said, "You've already lost," humans started planning. And now, 13 Earth soldiers were turning a battlefield into a graveyard. Mason regrouped with his team as the second wave collapsed. 10 left now. 3 gone in the last hour. No time to mourn. No strength for tears. Just grit and blood. "Phase 2 starts in 20, he said, breath ragged but steady. "Reyes, rig the West Ridge. Vega, get the last drone swarm online. Hanlon, I want eyes on the enemy comms." "And the rest of us?" asked Sergeant Nix, his voice rough from inhaling smoke. Mason glanced at the rising dust cloud in the east. "We meet them head on. Make 'em feel what Earth's wrath really looks like." No speeches, no glory, only vengeance, only Earth. The dust cloud thickened as the third wave of Dominion forces marched in, larger and angrier than before. They had finally realized this wasn't a mop-up. This was war. Real war. The kind they weren't used to fighting. Not the clean, strategic annihilation they'd practiced in their simulations. Not the diplomatic showdowns where planets bowed before superior tech. This was chaos. This was pain. This was humanity unchained. General Cotter barked orders from the temporary command unit stationed behind a line of armored carriers. He paced furiously, his thick claws scraping across the holomap as unit after unit blinked out of existence. "Send in the Scorch teams. I want the entire sector buried." "But the terrain is unstable!" A technician tried to protest. Cotter slammed a claw down. "Then let it collapse. I don't care if we lose soldiers. I want them exterminated." Down below, Captain Mason Cade had already seen it coming. From behind the twisted remnants of what used to be a comms tower, he watched the new troops fan out. Cautious now. Slower. No more overconfidence. They'd learned fear. That made them slightly smarter, but also easier to manipulate. "Vega," Mason said through his earpiece. "Light 'em up." From a hidden alcove in the rubble, Vega grinned and pulled the trigger on a makeshift mortar rig. The shell shrieked through the sky and landed dead center in the Dominion formation. Not just explosives this time. Chemical agents, harvested from their own dead. The Dominion screamed as their armor corroded from the inside out, melting through skin, muscle, and bone. Private Hanlon, working fast with bloodied hands, hacked into the enemy's comms frequency. Static hissed before he found a channel. "You wanted Earth," he whispered through the line. "You got it." The comms erupted with guttural curses, panic, confusion. Back at the ridge, Threx's patience finally snapped. "These animals are poisoning our air, stealing our weapons, using our tech against us. How?" Kotor's eyes narrowed. "Because they don't think like soldiers. They think like survivors. They don't just want to kill us, Threx. They want to break us first." And that's exactly what Mason was doing. By now, half of his remaining team was engaged in direct combat, tearing through Dominion squads with guerrilla-style ambushes and relentless hit-and-runs. Reyes had rigged a bridge with C4 and waited until 5 enemy tanks rolled over it before blowing the supports, sending tons of screaming metal and bodies into the abyss. Sergeant Nix, wounded and barely standing, still managed to drop 3 with a modified sniper round that turned into shrapnel mid-air. He laughed as he went down, laughing as his chest bled out, still shooting, even in his last breath. Mason reached him too late. He kneeled beside Nix's body and closed his comrade's eyes. "One by one," he murmured. "We'll make every death count." Vega knelt beside him. "We're down to 7. "Doesn't matter," Mason said, jaw clenched. "We'll bring the Dominion to their knees, even if it's just one of us left crawling." The next attack came faster. Dominion warships opened fire on the canyon walls, collapsing parts of the terrain and cutting off possible escape routes. But that was never part of Mason's plan anyway. There was no escape, just payback. Hanlon's voice crackled through the comm. "Captain, big one incoming, command unit. I think Threx is coming down himself." Mason stood up slowly, eyes narrowing through his visor. "Good." Because it wasn't enough to kill Dominion soldiers anymore. It was time to humiliate their leaders. Captain Mason Cade stood on what was left of the old lookout tower, wind howling through twisted steel and scorched beams. The Dominion's war machines were closing in, and they brought their general with them. Threx, the butcher of Laraxis, the one who'd torched 7 colonies and strung up prisoners as trophies, the one who thought humans were weak, soft, stupid. That was about to change. Beneath him, the squad scrambled to reposition. What was left of the 9th Recon Regiment had taken heavy losses, more than half the team gone, some in pieces, others missing altogether. Mason didn't need to ask if they'd make it out. He already knew the answer. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was an execution. "Hanlon, what's the count on the incoming units?" Mason asked through the comm. Hanlon's voice crackled with static. 70+ infantry, 4 armored crawlers, and 1 command tank. Mason's eyes narrowed. "Threx." "Yeah," Hanlon confirmed. "Signal match. That ugly bastard came down in person." Corporal Vega adjusted the scope on her rifle, perched on a ledge just above him. "You want the shot when he steps out?" "No," Mason said, calm and cold. "I want him to see me before he dies." Across the canyon, the Dominion forces advanced with surgical confidence. No more recklessness. They'd learned fear, but they hadn't learned respect. That's what today was about. The last few humans weren't going to go out begging. They were going to make legends. Mason signaled Reyes and Vega. "Positions locked?" "Locked," Reyes whispered from the eastern ridge. "Tunnel charges prepped. 30 seconds and the flank collapses." "Then we bring it down," Mason growled. "Let's turn this place into a burial site." The first blast ripped through the leftmost hill, sending tons of debris cascading into the enemy line. Screams followed. A crawler tumbled sideways, metal shrieking as it crushed a squad beneath it. The Dominion soldiers tried to regroup, barking orders in their harsh, insect-like tongue, but the humans gave them no time. From the smoke and ash, Mason charged. He was a blur of steel and fury, rifle in one hand, blade in the other. His boots hit the dirt with thunderous speed, and behind him came Vega and Reyes, guns blazing, lighting up the valley with a rain of fire. Hanlon stayed behind, feeding them enemy positions and jamming the Dominion signals. He was the brain. Mason was the hammer. Threx emerged from the command tank just in time to see his forces getting slaughtered by 7 filthy, bloodied humans who fought like gods possessed. Mason's blade found another throat. He spun, fired twice into the face of a Dominion elite, and ducked behind a fallen crawler. Blood, thick, green, and hissing, splattered across his armor. Across the field, Threx roared, pointing one massive claw at Mason. "That one! Bring me his head!" A dozen Dominion soldiers swarmed toward him. Mason didn't flinch. He activated the charges strapped beneath his chest plate, dropped a smoke pellet, and vanished into the chaos. Seconds later, a line of fire erupted between the crawling smoke. Reyes had flanked them, setting off another chain of mines that sent the soldiers flying into the sky. Mason leapt over a body, landed hard, rolled, and came up face to face with Threx. The two stared at each other, the battlefield falling silent for just a moment. Human and alien, predator and executioner. Hatred burned in Threx's eyes. But Mason? Mason looked bored. "Big talk from a bug who's never bled," he said coolly. Threx charged. Mason met him head-on. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't cinematic, it was savage. Threx slammed Mason into the dirt, but Mason drove his combat knife into the soft joint under Threx's shoulder plate. The alien shrieked. Mason's blade twisted. Threx clawed at him, slicing a line across Mason's ribs. They rolled through mud and broken bone. Mason took a punch to the side of the head, helmet cracked, blood flowing. But he didn't stop. He shoved a grenade into Threx's abdomen port and kicked him backward. Threx looked down, saw the blinking red light, and snarled. "You wouldn't!" The explosion lit up the valley. When the dust cleared, only one figure was standing. Limping, bloodied, barely breathing. Mason Cade. He spit out a mouthful of blood and stared at the scattered remains of the Dominion commander. "One down," he muttered. "Now let's finish the rest." The smell of scorched alien flesh still hung thick in the air. Captain Mason Cade stumbled backward, his knees nearly buckling. He'd taken a direct hit to the ribs, and every breath now felt like sucking in knives. Blood trickled from a gash above his eyebrow, and his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the raw adrenaline wearing off. Threx was gone. The Dominion's so-called war god was nothing more than green mist and shattered armor. But killing a leader didn't end a war, not when the enemy still had an army. "Mason, come in!" Hanlon's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got movement, multiple signatures, heavy equipment. They're sending in the annihilators. You've got 5 minutes, maybe less." Mason cursed under his breath and forced himself upright. "Rally what's left. We fall back to the trench line and make our last stand there." Corporal Vega's voice came through next, strained but steady. "I'm down to 1 mag and half a charge pack." "You'll make it last," Mason replied. "We all will." 7 had gone down to 5. Reyes was dragging a shattered leg. Hanlon had burns up one side of his arm from an earlier blast. Vega's armor was cracked in 2 places. The last member, Lee, hadn't spoken in an hour. He'd lost his brother during the last ambush and just kept moving, like a ghost behind them. They reached the trench, dug days ago in desperation, reinforced with what scraps of Dominion metal they could find. It was narrow, tight, but defensible. Barely. Mason climbed up the edge and peered through a broken scope at the oncoming force. The annihilators were twice the size of standard crawlers, moving on 8 legs with mounted plasma cannons, their hulls glowing red-hot from the reactors inside. Around them marched elite Dominion guards, silent, methodical, untouched by fear. 20 minutes ago, Vega muttered behind him, "I thought we might actually win this." Mason looked back at her, his lip curling into a tired smirk. We did win. Then why are they still coming? He didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about scarring the enemy, making them regret ever stepping foot on human ground. Teaching them that if Earth fell, it would fall clawing out throats and biting through armor. Mason crouched and passed out what little ammo remained. Set charges. Focus fire on the joints. When they get close, we drop the trench on them. Reyes laughed weakly. That's the worst plan I've ever heard. It'll work, Mason said, and for some reason they all believed him. The ground shook. Dust fell like snow. The machines were coming. And then, something strange. A sound. Low at first, faint, but growing louder, like thunder, like engines. Mason froze. Hanlon was the first to spot it. South sky, incoming crafts, multiple human IFF tags. I repeat, human signatures. They looked up as 6 atmospheric dropships broke through the clouds, their undercarriages glowing with descent burners. Painted black, marked with Earth's old military insignia, units no one had seen in years. Ghost units, the kind only whispered about. One dropship opened its side door mid-air, and a figure jumped out, free-falling with nothing but a reinforced exosuit and a shock-absorbent booster pack. The man landed like a meteor. Dust exploded outward. Dominion soldiers stumbled, confused, as the figure rose from the crater. 7 feet tall in a powered assault rig, visor glowing red, plasma blade in one hand and railgun in the other. The armor bore one word. Hell jumpers. Mason's mouth twitched. Number freaking. Way more drop pods followed. 12, 24. Then ground tanks rumbled over the ridge behind them, Earth's insignia etched into their hulls. Command had finally responded, or maybe the hell jumpers had come on their own. Either way, the tide just shifted. Captain Cade, a deep voice crackled through the comms, patched directly to his helmet. We'll take it from here. Mason grinned, blood dripping from his chin. Too late, he said. We've already started the party. And with that, Earth's most dangerous soldiers met their match, fighting not for survival now, but for revenge. The battlefield screamed as the Helljumpers charged forward, and the Dominion, for the first time, hesitated. They came to finish the war. The Helljumpers didn't waste time with strategy briefings or caution. They didn't send drones ahead or wait for favorable conditions. They just landed and started killing. From the moment the boots hit the ground, the battlefield shifted. Where Mason and his team had been fighting tooth and nail just to survive, the Helljumpers turned it into a slaughter. One of them carried a rail cannon the size of a small car, vaporizing Dominion elites in a single blast. Another moved with a kind of robotic precision, dual-wielding plasma axes that tore through metal like cloth. It wasn't just tech, it was attitude. These were Earth's worst nightmares given form. Soldiers trained for missions that were never supposed to exist. Missions where survival wasn't even part of the objective. Shock and erase. That was their motto. Captain Mason Cade stood in the trench, hands still tight around his rifle, heart thudding as he watched what he could only describe as a revenge storm sweep across the valley. They're not just pushing the line, Vega murmured beside him. They're obliterating it. Mason nodded slowly. This is what Earth sends when it doesn't want survivors. The Dominion forces were faltering now, panic setting in despite their command structure. With Threx gone and the battlefield torn to shreds, they'd expected to steamroll the last of the human resistance. Instead, they were being backed into a corner. Hanlon, still nursing burns, tapped into the Dominion frequencies. The audio was chaos. Orders screamed in conflicting dialects, unit leaders begging for evac, some breaking down entirely. They're requesting orbital support, Hanlon said wide-eyed. They're going to glass the canyon. Mason's jaw clenched. Of course they are, Cowards lose ground, so they burn it instead. He toggled his comm to the Helljumper frequency. You hearing this? A voice came through, gravelly and calm. Loud and clear. That's why we brought insurance. Above them, the clouds parted again. But this time it wasn't dropships. It was Earth's orbital defense cruisers. 2 of them. Massive, jagged silhouettes that blotted out the sun. Weapons ports gleaming, shields pulsing with energy. These weren't evacuation vessels. They were purifiers. The kind Earth had never deployed in over a century, not even during the Martian riots. Now they were here, and they weren't flying flags. They were flying warnings. The first beam lanced downward, striking the outer ridge where Dominion forces had begun regrouping. It didn't explode. It disintegrated. Dirt, rock, metal, bodies, gone in an instant. Just vapor and silence. Mason ducked instinctively, shielding his face from the heat wash that followed. Holy hell, Vega whispered. We've gone full extinction mode. The Dominion line broke. They tried to retreat, but the Helljumpers wouldn't allow it. The black-armored Titans moved with brutal efficiency, cutting down anything that moved. No prisoners, no mercy, just retribution. Mason knew what this meant. The war might have started on Centauri 9, but Earth had made a statement today. You come for us. We don't fight back. We erase you. Captain, Reyes grunted, crawling up from the trench, leg still wrapped in a torn tourniquet. That command crawler's still intact on the East Ridge. If we take it, we get access to their network, tactical data, supply routes, even fleet movements. Mason turned to Vega. She was already loading a fresh mag. Looks like we're not done yet, he said. With the Helljumpers pushing the front, Mason led his battered squad on a flanking route through the scorched rubble. The ground was still hot beneath their boots, the air filled with smoke and the hiss of melting armor. The crawler sat like a wounded beast, scorch marks across its hull, but still operational. 2 Dominion guards remained, unaware of the humans approaching from the blind side. Reyes dropped one with a single shot. Mason handled the other personally, slipping behind the creature and driving his blade straight into the base of its skull. No noise, no struggle. They entered the crawler and found the command core still running. Hanlon's eyes lit up. This thing's got access to the entire Dominion battle net. I can pull their fallback routes, fleet positions, even their encrypted chatter. Mason smiled grimly. Do it. Let's find out where they're running. Because this wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a hunt. And humanity had just started. Inside the Dominion crawler, Hanlon's fingers flew across the alien interface. The data streamed faster than any of them expected. Logs, coordinates, distress signals, and something Mason hadn't dared hope for, locations of primary command nexuses across Dominion-held space. This isn't just tactical data, Hanlon said, eyes wide. They left the whole damn back door open. I'm looking at fleet patterns, internal disputes, even records of planetary resource drains. This is gold. Captain Mason Cade leaned against the scorched control panel, still bleeding beneath his armor. Copy it, all of it, then wipe the core clean. Hanlon hesitated. You want to destroy this? It could be worth... We're not leaving them anything to come back to, Mason said coldly. They brought this war to Earth's doorstep. Now we take it to theirs. Reyes hobbled in, rifle slung awkwardly over his shoulder. What's the word? We just found the heart of their empire, Mason replied. Now we see how hard it beats. By the time they exited the crawler, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The Dominion had broken. What wasn't crushed by the Helljumpers was scattered across the rocks, crawling away in fear. Some tried to surrender. The Helljumpers didn't acknowledge it. The message had already been sent. You either die on your feet or under ours. A field commander approached Mason. His exo-armor was 3 times the weight of standard infantry gear, its arms etched with war kills and unit marks. His helmet hissed open, revealing a hard, scarred face, eyes the color of steel. "Captain Cade," he said, voice deep and level. "Colonel Dane Rourke. You and your team just rewrote the rulebook." "Wasn't trying to," Mason muttered. "We just weren't ready to die quiet." Rourke smirked. "We don't do quiet anymore." Behind them, the Helljumper squads were already organizing cleanup ops. Corpses were marked and burned. Captured tech was boxed and tagged. Their precision was terrifying. No celebration, no reflection. Just more objectives. Hanlon handed Mason a data stick. "Everything's here. Dominion fallback routes, fleet locations, civil unrest in 3 sectors, even something labeled Project Harvester. Might be their version of a bioweapon or some kind of extinction protocol." Mason took it, eyes hardening. "We give this to Earth Command?" Rourke shook his head. "Command didn't send us, not officially. They froze ops after the last Dominion raid on Europa. Got scared. We didn't." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You went rogue?" "We went human," Rourke said. "And now that we've cracked their network, we don't wait for orders. We lead." It was a different kind of war now. No longer about territory, not about diplomacy. It was vengeance laced with strategy. A purge of an empire that thought Earth would bow. Mason turned to his battered squad. Vega, bruised and low on ammo. Reyes, still limping but alive. Hanlon, already pulling up projections of the next target. They were worn down, but not broken. They'd gone through hell and come out sharper. "You still with me?" Mason asked them. "Ride or die," Vega said, spitting blood from her cracked lip. "Let's kill their next god," Reyes grinned. Hanlon looked up from his display. "I've pinpointed one of their primary fleet coordination nexuses. Mid-orbit station in the Veltrax system. It's surrounded by warships, but if we slip in and feed them false orders, we could have them fire on each other." Mason nodded. "Beautiful. How soon can we move?" Rourke spoke up. "The Hammerfall leaves orbit in an hour. That's our ride." The Hammerfall was a deep strike cruiser, Earth's equivalent of a guillotine. 1 ship, 1 mission, total annihilation. It hadn't been used since the last rebellion on Titan. Now it was coming out of the shadows. As the crew prepared to board, Mason looked out at the battlefield one last time. Smoke still rose in pillars. The ground was stained with blood, human and alien. But the silence felt earned now. Not like defeat, more like the deep breath before a storm. "Next stop?" Vega asked as the ramp lifted. Mason tucked the data stick into a pouch on his chest plate and smirked. "Wherever they think they're safe." The Hammerfall dropped out of slip space like a blade through silk, its dark hull cloaked in interference waves, silent and invisible above the Dominion's core command station in the Veltrax system. The station, a monstrous ring of black alloy orbiting a blood-red planet, glowed with life. Thousands of lights, hundreds of ships docked. It was the heart of their fleet coordination, and it was wide open. Captain Mason Cade stood on the bridge, the Dominion's network map hovering in holographic form before him. Vega, Reyes, and Hanlon stood nearby, fully geared, eyes locked on the massive structure that loomed like a god's halo above the planet. Behind them, Colonel Rourke and his Helljumpers made final checks. "Any alarms?" Mason asked. "None," Hanlon replied. "They think their encryption is uncrackable. Forgot Earth makes monsters out of broken code." Mason stared at the station, jaw clenched. "Then we don't just hit it. We make them rip each other apart while we watch." Rourke stepped forward. "When we hit that control nexus, we feed them false commands, just like you planned. Redirect power signatures, fake mutiny signals, make their defense fleet think they're being sabotaged from inside. Then..." We blow the whole damn ring, Vega finished with a grin. The operation began at 0200. The Hammerfall launched 4 stealth pods, each holding a 5-person team. One of them carried Mason, Vega, Reyes, Hanlon, and Rourke. They crashed through the outer shielding of the station like ghosts, sliding into its maintenance shafts and crawling through metal corridors slick with condensation and Dominion stench. Inside, the station was alive with activity. Dominion soldiers marched in drills, unaware that the walls were already bleeding humans. The command center, a circular dome guarded by 24 elites, sat at the top of the central spire. Mason's team had 20 minutes to breach it before Dominion patrols changed shifts. Hanlon opened a side panel and began slicing the access port. Once I'm in, I upload the virus. It'll trigger their own failsafe commands, set every ship in their fleet to hostile status, including each other. And the explosives? Reyes asked. Wired throughout the command core, Vega said. We trigger them after the fleet starts tearing itself apart. It was surgical chaos. The breach was fast. 2 flash bombs, 1 shock round. Mason went in first, dropping 3 with headshots before his boots even hit the floor. Reyes followed, blade in hand, cutting down the nearest guard without hesitation. Vega covered the left flank, gunning down the last 2 before they could scream for help. Hanlon raced to the terminal, breathing hard. Give me 30 seconds. Alarms blared seconds later, but not for the humans. Dominion ships outside began locking weapons on each other. Communications scrambled. False enemy tags flooded the system. Ship captains barked in panic. Someone launched a torpedo at what they thought was a traitor vessel. The response came instantly. Lasers, missiles, plasma bolts. The Veltrax fleet, once Earth's greatest threat, turned on itself like a snake devouring its own tail. Mason watched it all from the screen. Trigger the charges. Vega didn't hesitate. The command center lit up in orange flashes as the explosives detonated in sequence. The station groaned, its ring fracturing, inner hulls collapsing inward like a dying star. Dominion soldiers scrambled and screamed as the entire structure buckled. Mason and his team sprinted toward the extraction shaft as fire poured down the corridors behind them. The blast wave chased them. Hungry, boiling, angry, a drop pod yanked them free just as the station cracked in 2 and exploded above the red planet, casting debris across the stars like a funeral pyre. From the Hammerfall, they watched the wreckage burn. The Dominion fleet was gone. Their command structure obliterated. Their empire crippled in one surgical strike from a team of soldiers everyone thought was already dead. Rourke turned to Mason. You just ended a galactic war. Mason shook his head. We just reminded them who they were messing with. Back on Earth, news broke within hours. The once distant, monstrous Dominion Empire was retreating from every front line. Planets liberated themselves in waves. The coalition reformed, this time under Earth's leadership. Not with diplomacy, with fear-born respect. In the end, only 5 soldiers returned from Centauri 9. 5 ghosts who dragged an empire to its knees. And as the galaxy slowly turned its eyes back toward Earth, one message echoed through the stars. Humanity doesn't surrender. It survives. Then it wins. Always.